welcome to Super Talk Show. It's an honor and a dream to have somebody like you, to be on Super Talk Show. So thank you so much for joining.
Good evening, Heidi, and thank you for having me here.
Yeah. And to start, well, first of all, as we all know, you are a member of the United Nations Youth Advisory Group for Climate Change, for under the Secretary General. So that's a huge role. I want to ask if you can do a brief introduction about yourself and also how you were able to be on the Youth Advisory Group.
Absolutely. I'm 27 years old. I'm coming from a tiny country in southeastern Europe called Moldova. For those who do not know much about it, it's sandwiched between Romania and Ukraine. I'm an economist by education with a specific focus on nexus between trade and environment. And in my climate and sustainability advocacy, which I have been doing already for 8 years and counting, was I was primarily focused on the interaction between jobs, industrial policy, economic growth, and sustainability, which naturally led me to do some groundbreaking work on green jobs and basically bringing a new level of capacity building in the domain of green jobs for youth out there who have the intuitive understanding of what that concept means, but not so much practical pathways to turn their careers around to make sure that they can dedicate themselves to a green purpose and with that also contribute to change in the economy. The way that I became a member of UN Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group on Climate Change was both straightforward and not. Straightforward in the sense that there was a selection process, so there is no magic wand there. And it was not straightforward in the sense that, of course, there were a lot of steps that led me there. Um, just if we talk about the selection process itself, first it was taking nomination in the selection process from Yango, official youth constituency, to the UNFCCC, where I served until very recently as its first contact point on green jobs, and then making it into the short list compiled by all the UN structures who were participating in the effort, and then having my name signed off on by the Secretary General himself. And our call is basically meeting us in the twilight zone where I have finished together with the other 6 colleagues of mine nearly all of our duties in the youth advisory group, bar the handover to the new one. So I am basically on my way out already.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Did I understand you're finishing your term on the Youth Advisory Group?
Yes, I have already been youth advisor for 2.5 years.
Oh.
And one of the milestones of our work was securing this format to be a permanent one. So we are going to have successors. They are already as we speak, they are in the process of being put through the final selection.
Wow. Okay. That actually makes sense. So wow, that's very groundbreaking to have a youth advisory, a permanent one next to the next to the Secretary General from now on. So I sort of want to ask, as a European youth, like also for our super audience, because our demographic, for your information, are also European, particularly Polish students, high school students who are trying to make an impact in the world. So how would you suggest young people like ourselves to take local actions to make a global impact, and in doing so working with the United Nations in some capacity? How would you recommend us to get started?
For starters, what is important to know about the way you can make an impact, the United Nations is not the only and sometimes not the most efficient way to make your impact on climate. The processes that are going on in the United Nations on climate, they are multilateral, which means that every country has an equal voice in how they can change and shape them. So as you can imagine, when you have 193 countries on board and everybody demands to be heard, it's oftentimes very cumbersome. So a lot of action that is actually driven forward is driven at lower levels, but lower not by impact, but rather by scale. So in whatever position you are, in whatever community you are, It doesn't matter if you are in some way engaged with the UN or not. It's not required to make an impact in the way that you consider for yourself important. What is important is to understand your passion, to specify it for yourself, and determine that particular subtopic subsection of climate agenda, like is, for example, green jobs or climate finance to me, where you are aiming to make an impact. And that is, of course, attributable to those who particularly want to tie at least, if not their future career, but at least their advocacy path to climate. But of course, many of us, we are only tangentially interested in climate because we might have some other persuasions, we might have some other daily things to deal with, and so we might sometimes not have the capacity needed to get engaged at a particular advocacy level. So for those of you who are based in Poland, uh, for those of you who are already going to reach the voting age, considering that there are going to be legislative elections in Poland this year, just go and vote first and foremost. Um, it's a privilege to live in a democratic country and be able to make your voice heard at the ballot box. Use this opportunity. And for those of you who want to engage more locally and should, um, make sure that you make the most out of local public hearings on matters related to environment, because in fact, I do not know the specifics and particularities of Polish divisions of power in this regard between various levels. But I can assure you that oftentimes some very concrete decisions, like for example, on sewage, on transport, and so on, like that concern pollution and emissions, they are made by local councils, by city councils, and so on. So do not disregard those levels of engagements. It's not only about marches and demonstrations and so on. It's about being there in those deliberations in those rooms within your community at the moment where it counts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are definitely some really good advice. So yeah, super audience, be sure to note that down. And I want to ask a little bit about, your current ongoing experience being in the youth advisory group. Can I ask how often do you guys meet, and how does those meetings look like with the Secretary General, especially such a prestigious actor in the United Nations?
With the Secretary General, we have been meeting once every quarter, but this is only the tip of the iceberg as far as our actual work is concerned. Our work has pretty much never stopped. So there is a lot of public facing and not so public facing part of it, that every meeting with the Secretary General is really like to, in a sense, top up what was done in the previous period, and to kickstart the next period. So this is, while it is extremely important and we get very valuable feedback, and the Secretary General has really changed throughout these 2.5 years, and he was very demanding to us, and for a good reason. He always pursues the principle that I'm not here to ask. I'm not here to hear you asking me questions, but coming with the solutions and suggestions. And that's what we've been doing, and that's what those who will be after us will have to do as well. And a day of youth climate advisor to the UN Secretary General can significantly vary, especially considering that in our mandate we had well, I at least had to deal with two riders of apocalypse, so plague and war. What it teaches you is that for better or worse, when you are working with a person of such global importance, at least from the moral point of view, uh, it's not that a single topic is always the first on his agenda. So as much as we want the Secretary General or any other high-level official to always have climate on top, things happen, they interfere, and what you need to be able to do is to always stay relevant with climate and your advice on climate to him, and to be able to link it to the concrete burning issues of the day. Because sure, one day, for example, we can have floods in Pakistan that grab the headlines, but the other day it's there is a deal to negotiate for transporting Ukrainian grain, and so on and so forth. And all this, you need to weave all these circumstances into a coherent pattern of making sure that whatever you provide always stays relevant regardless of the changing political context, that it would be something durable for the Secretary General to employ in his speeches, in his initiatives, in his appearances, and in his meetings with the higher level officials from the states.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Just this idea of adapting to whatever crisis that is coming up next. And as you mentioned, you've been in this position for 2 years. So you've seen the COVID-19, you've seen the Ukraine war. So throughout this time, it's also really important for climate to always remain on top of the agenda, but at the same time, adapting to a global crisis. So just one last question from Super Talk Show. This is something I always ask to super guests. If there's one tips that you can give us for, young people to initiate local activities in helping in climate change, what would that thing be? So last quote from you during this interview.
I've already mentioned it, in fact, is specify your passion for yourself. Pick your very own battle and relentlessly pursue it and build allyships for it. And this is the way, and be mindful, of course, of the level where you can actually make an impact. And this is the way to actually be sure that you will see how your input of passion, of knowledge, of commitment will turn into an output of betterment of the environment in the aspect that you wanted to see better.
Okay, thank you so much, Vlad, for giving all these tips and advice and insights into your work in the United Nations. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, Heidi.
Thank you. Bye.